Part 6. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Ganxiao. Chapter 51. Len Buding's bloody face appeared in front of him. Even Captain Wang, who had seen many corpses, couldn't help but be frightened. Why is there a body here? Su Tong's heart moved, and he silently walked to the body and examined it carefully. Although the corpse looked bloody, it was only the face. Perhaps because of the extremely low temperature here, the corpse looked more like a freeze-dried mummy. If you look closely, you can even see the details of the palm prints. He took the flashlight from Captain Wang's hand, opened the mouth of the corpse, and took a closer look. Then other parts of the body were examined. The man is about 35 to 40 years old. The fatal injury was on the chest. He looked at the left hand of the corpse and added, "The preliminary judgment is that it may be suicide." Seeing the serious look on Su Tong's face, Team Wang was stunned for a moment. Why did he feel as professional as the forensic doctors in his own team? But when he heard him say it was suicide, Team Wang couldn't help but frown. When it came to this kind of question, he had to become serious. How are you sure it was suicide? Su Tong pointed to the wound on his chest. You can tell from the scar on the chest that the incision is horizontal, but judging from the damage to the muscle tissue, it is tilted 1.5 centimeters outward. Such a scar is consistent with the characteristics of a left-handed person. As he spoke, he raised the two hands of the corpse and asked Team Wang to take a closer look with a flashlight. He found that the left fist was full of calluses and some small wounds, while the right hand had very few calluses. The most important thing is that the thick layer of calluses on the tiger's mouth is extremely eye-catching. As a veteran in the army, Captain Wang knows very well that such thick calluses mean that the opponent often uses this hand to split with a knife. This phenomenon occurs due to the constant friction between the handle of the knife and the tiger's mouth. Su Tong rummaged around on his body and found a black short knife. At first glance, the knife looked dark and inconspicuous, but anyone who held it in his hand could feel its heavy weight. He threw the knife to Captain Wang, who took it and took a look. His eyes flashed. What a knife! In addition to the knife, Su Tong also found a sign. It was hard to tell whether it was metal or wood. There was a snake painted on the front of the sign and a willow character written on the back. Seeing this, the little hope in Su Tong's heart was completely shattered. He threw the wooden sign into the prop book. The information provided in the prop book completely confirmed his suspicion. Attraction sign. Things handed down from the 5 Lao immortals in the Northeast are also one of the 5 keepsakes. Special ability 1, Attract. By spending some script points, you can invite the spiritual creature corresponding to the attraction card. Cooling time, 3 days. Note, the more script points you consume, the stronger your ability to attract spiritual creatures. Warning, if you are not a disciple, attracting spiritual creatures may cause backlash. The probability of backlash is extremely high. Please do not try it easily. Special ability 2. Pending identification. Special ability 3. Pending identification. This item is a special prop. If you want to take it away from the world of the scenario, you need to complete certain conditions. Looking at the remarks on the signboard, it was almost certain that the corpse in front of me was none other than the protagonist of the diary, Mr. Hu Qi. Not to mention that this brand is actually a prop. What makes people wonder is why Hu Qi is here and committed suicide. You can obviously go back by climbing up. When he thought of those blood words, he suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. He was wondering, is there a possibility that Hu Qi left the blood words first and then slipped down and committed suicide? So why did he do this? In the above, he used the contents of the diary to imitate Hu Qi. What he imitated was not only his behavior, but also the character revealed in the diary. What he felt was that Hu Qi was cold on the outside and hot on the inside, with a free and easy personality. Such a person would never push himself to such an extreme point unless absolutely necessary, but he could not think of the reason for his suicide. If I really insist on saying it, maybe it has something to do with the thing mentioned in his diary. But I can no longer get the answers from a corpse. With this unsolved mystery, Su Tong and Team Wang began to climb up, intending to climb out from the hole above to have a look. The two climbed up along the entrance of the cave, and soon climbed out of the entrance. But when the two of them raised their heads and looked around, they were shocked by the scene in front of them. In front of me, straight and towering spruce trees replaced the uneven stones. Rays of golden light sprinkled down from the huge group of gems above the stone wall, and were reflected on the green grass, creating a unique scene. Like a dream. It's hard to believe that they are actually underground. Although Huki's shock was mentioned repeatedly in his diary, Huki did not write down in detail what the shock was. It was only at this moment that Su Tong roughly understood why Huki stopped writing, because it was difficult for any words to describe everything in front of him. This is simply a miracle. Even Team Wang couldn't help but exclaimed in surprise from the bottom of his heart. They looked at the green shade in front of them and saw a green lake in the distance. There is a vast mist on the lake. At the end of the lake is a waterfall with a huge drop, and the huge roar of the waterfall can be heard from a distance. The waterfall is like a pure white veil hanging down, and the vast smoke wave is the mist rising from the waterfall crashing down from a high place. In the mist, there is a magnificent palace. From a distance, across the lake and through the mist, you can clearly see the tall and straight stone pillars. And the majestic stone steps extending up the cliff. It is unimaginable that such a magnificent palace and acres of greenery can be built in this underground world. This is simply a miracle and cannot be overstated. Su Tong looked at the scene in front of him, and there were only 4 words in his mind: cave, heaven and paradise. Just when Captain Wang was in a good mood and even wanted to sing a song, he heard a scream that was even more exciting than him. A miracle, a miracle. The Egyptian pyramids and the temple of Artemis are all construction waste. This is called a miracle. Zhou Huashan's excited screams could be heard from a distance. Hearing his voice, Su Tong and Captain Wang's expressions changed slightly and they hurriedly hid themselves. Zhou Huashan's voice was heard from far away. Look, is that the sun? That is an artificial sundae. It is made of flawless crystal gems and polished into countless small concave and convex surfaces. It uses the principle of light refraction to refract the outside light in, creating a condensing effect. There is also the grass under our feet. These grasses are carefully selected from meadowsweet, Xianbei flowers, heather trees, and most of the plants in the North Temperate Zone to ensure their survival here. Zhou Huasheng excitedly picked up the black soil on the ground, and his whole body almost fell into a state of madness. Then he sprinkled the soil and looked at the magnificent palace in front of him with a mesmerized expression. Dongtian Paradise, Dongtian Paradise, this is the Immortal Ascension Bureau we are looking for. Snort. Huo Ying snorted coldly. He didn't pay attention to the so-called Immortal Promotion Bureau. It was just a legend. What he was looking for was 100 times and 1,000 times more precious than those illusory things. Yang Guanjin stood behind Huo Ying, supporting his adoptive father old Bart with one hand. The two looked at the palace in the distance and looked at each other, with a different light in each other's eyes. I really didn't expect that there is such a place. Lao Yang, do you think we can still find such a place if we return to reality? Sangha put his arm on Yang Zixuan's shoulder and asked him curiously. Can't find it? Yang Zixuan's answer was simple. Things created in the script world can only exist in the script world. Even if he finds this position again in reality, it will not be like this. Oh, that's such a pity. Sangha shook his head with regret, patted Yang Zixuan's shoulder and said, your main mission is exploration, and it does not conflict with my main mission. Let's keep the same. After completing the mission, you leave as soon as possible, and don't delay anyone. After saying that, he glanced at the livid Xiongtao behind him, and saw that Xiongtao's face was still stained, obviously from the injury he had just suffered. "Humph, you all have seen Brother Huo Ying's strength, don't bring trouble on your own." Xiong Tao snorted coldly, but did not refute anything. Because just when they were found by Sango and the others, Xiong Tao had already tried Huo Ying's iron fist, and the difference in strength between the two was simply endless. His divine light shield couldn't even hold up 2 punches in front of Huo Ying, and the third punch knocked him to the ground. Such terrifying strength was not something ordinary players like them could provoke. Only certified players are qualified to challenge plot characters like Huo Ying. Seeing that Xiong Tao stopped talking, Sango nodded with satisfaction. In fact, he was also worried that they would be defeated. After all, they were a breeding team. They had an astonishing script score, so there was no guarantee that they wouldn't have some life-saving tricks. In short, either kill him with one move and completely eliminate the root cause, or don't push people into a dead end. Thinking of this, Sango couldn't help but remember that when he was with that boy before, he also said similar words. Sometimes when the enemy is driven to a dead end, he is also driving himself to a dead end. Volume 2, Chapter 18. When thinking of this kid, Sango couldn't help but wonder, where is this kid now? He was not worried about Su Tong, but was afraid that he would not die. This guy was just a newcomer, and he already had props and script points in his hands that others could not earn in 3 or 4 script worlds. He is also treacherous and slippery, and even when he goes crazy, he is willing to kill himself. The thought of offending such a guy makes me sleepless. As he was thinking about it, the morning dog suddenly twitched his nose, raised his brows, and looked at the woods beside him with suspicious eyes. "Go faster." Huo Ying, who was walking in front, saw them following far behind and couldn't help but urge them. Yes, go, hurry up." Sangu hurriedly urged Yang Zixuan and the others, and then he suddenly covered his stomach, hiss. "You guys go first. I feel uncomfortable in my stomach. Maybe it's because the roasted wild boar didn't die. Brother Huo, I'm going to go for a while." Sangu shouted at Huo Ying. Huo Do nodded and told him to hurry up, and then Sangu hurriedly got into the woods. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 52. The morning dog raised his nose and carefully pushed aside the bushes to take a look. His face suddenly froze and he saw a torn cotton sock hanging on top of the bushes. "How about it, do my smelly feet smell good?" Su Tong's teasing voice came from behind. "Oh, no matter how smelly things are, I have smelled them." Sangu stood up disapprovingly, turned around and saw Su Tong on the treetop not far away, and sneered, "Tell me, why did you lure me out on purpose? Don't blame me for not warning you. The poison in your body will take effect in about 4 or 5 hours. Without an antidote, you won't be able to survive even if you return. Hey, how about making a deal?" Su Tong asked with a smile on his face. "Trade." The morning dog grinned, looked Su Tong up and down, and couldn't help but sneer, "When the poisonous insects start to attack and the pain becomes unbearable, I can easily chop off your head. Then the things in your prop book I choose at will. Why should I make a deal with you?" Seeing the calm look of Sangu, who was determined to win thousands of miles away, Su Tong gave a thumbs up. "I just like how confident you are. In this case, I'd better go find Yang Zixuan and the others to work together on this secret." As he said this, he patted the non-existent dust on his hands and stood up to go find Yang Zixuan and the others. Seeing this, Sangu began to murmur in his heart. He didn't know what tricks this kid was playing, but judging from his confident appearance, it seemed that he really had some secret. If he really cooperates with Yang Zixuan and the others, etc. Sangu called out to him, "You signed a contract with Yang Zixuan. You are the most suitable partners. Shouldn't you have approached him first? Why did you lure me out?" "Because you dare to bet." Su Tong turned back and looked at Sangu, the risk of gambling is very high. Yang Zixuan and the others are too stable. They are strong, but with them, they will be used as a bargaining chip at any time. Once they find that the losses may be greater than the gains, they will be killed at any time. Will be abandoned, so if I had to choose, I think we are quite compatible. Bah, only a devil can believe it. Sangu didn't believe it, but in his heart he still thought it was true. After all, breeders place too much emphasis on profit and loss, and bullying the weak is their specialty. Believe it or not, I can guarantee that the secret may make us the biggest winner. A smile appeared on Su Tong's lips, and his overwhelming sense of confidence immediately made Sangu's heart beat. If it were anyone else, Sangu would never believe him, even if he made ridiculous claims. But the kid in front of him gave him a different feeling. Thinking about his previous profits, he had made a windfall of 300 script points. Sangu began to waver in his heart. But then he thought about it, he had embraced Huo Ying now. Yang Zixuan and the others couldn't afford to make any trouble. He would soon complete the main mission smoothly, so why take risks with this kid? After thinking for a long time, Manga raised his head. Tell me about your plan. After about 10 minutes passed. The morning dog held up his pants and ran quickly out of the bushes, following closely behind Huo Ying and others. Watching Sangu leave, Captain Wang walked out from a corner holding the short knife. The strange thing was that from beginning to end, Sangu didn't notice his presence. Are you sure Mr. Li will help us? Team Wang walked up to him, full of doubts about Li Laozi who had come back from the dead. There are so many smart people in the world, but how many are not greedy? After Su Tong finished speaking, he quietly followed with his team leader. It's right in front. Huo Ying and others walked very fast, and when they passed through the woods in front of them, the magnificent hall appeared in front of everyone. The main hall is located next to the waterfall, covered with mist all over the sky. The steps paved with gold shone dazzlingly under the light, and even Huo Ying himself was in a trance. You go ahead. At this time, Huo Ying turned around and motioned for Yang Guanjin and others to walk in the front, which naturally included Yang Zixuan and Xiong Tao. His rough hands grabbed old Bart's shoulders, and his cold eyes stared at Yang Guanjin's face. Don't play tricks, or any of you will die. We can leave if you want, but take out the antidote first. Yang Zixuan frowned and stepped forward, extending his palm towards Huo Ying. Without an antidote, we will not take another step forward. Huo Ying lowered his head and looked at Yang Zixuan, his sinister triangular eyes flashing with ferocious light. The surroundings were suddenly so quiet that you could hear a pin drop, and everyone's eyes were fixed on Huo Ying's body as tall as a mountain. Some Miao people had already silently put their hands on the handles of their knives at their waists. Even the morning dog couldn't help but hold his breath. It seemed that he never expected that Yang Zixuan would ask Huo Ying for the antidote at this time, and he suddenly began to worry in his heart. He was now certain that if Yang Zixuan dared to be so tough, he must have a powerful trump card that he had not yet used. If Huo Ying refused to give it, it would probably be a life and death battle. Looking at the thin face in front of him, Huo Ying's sparse white hair started to float with a gust of wind that came from nowhere. After a moment, he suddenly smiled, took out a small bottle from the bag on his waist and threw it to Yang Zixuan. At the same time, he said in blunt Chinese, I'll give you one bottle first, and I'll give you the rest after I put it up. No, you must give them all to me. Yang Zixuan took a step back and did not take the small medicine bottle from Huo Ying's hand. He could sense that there seemed to be something in the mist in front of him that he could not see through. In this case, if something unexpected happens, he will choose to activate the special props as soon as possible. Even if he risks upgrading the difficulty of killing the next round of scripts, he never wants to die here inexplicably. If Huo Ying refused to give the medicine, then he would be completely cut off and would have no choice but to give it a try. As if sensing the determination in Yang Zixuan's eyes, Huoying gradually opened his brows and instead put away the medicine bottle in his hand. "Let me send you up." As he spoke, he suddenly opened his palms, and his figure was close to Yang Zixuan in the blink of an eye. Fight. Seeing that the negotiation failed, Yang Zixuan's luck was completely wiped out, and he decisively activated the prop card that he had never wanted to use. Long Wen Wuhu. Light blue tattoos appeared on his arms, one dragon and one tiger, making a deafening roar as if they came to life. At the same time, no movement was seen on his part. A long sword appeared in his hand, and then slightly he drew out half of the sword blade. This sword blade is transparent, as if it is condensed like ice, and then there is a very bright blood-colored texture spreading on it, which is combined to form a bright rune, as if it will be clearly engraved in people's minds. Once it falls on everyone in his eyes, I don't know why, but there is a low whine in my heart for no reason. Huoying's face changed drastically, and a strong sense of crisis flooded into his heart. It seemed that he did not expect that these defeated generals would have such terrifying power. In horror, he hurriedly pulled back, only to see him open his mouth and spit out a cloud of black mist, and dense insects flew out from the black mist. Seeing these bugs, the expressions of the Miao people suddenly changed, and they actually ran back without caring about anything. Blood-devouring peak. Yang Guanjin turned even pale, as if he didn't expect Huoying to actually raise this thing. In her heart of horror, she didn't care much. She grabbed old Bart and ran away. The morning dog was still thinking of taking advantage, but when everyone saw that everyone was running away faster than anyone else, he immediately changed his face and ran back without looking back. Why did they start fighting? Su Tong and Team Wang were following along leisurely, but the sudden change caught him off guard. Yang Zixuan must have been cornered. Su Tong knew Yang Zixuan's character very well. If he hadn't been cornered, he would never have taken action easily. Hide first. He grabbed Team Wang and the two of them hid in the bushes. They heard a deafening thunder in the distance. Team Wang originally wanted to go up and take a look, but Su Tong pulled him back. As the saying goes, when gods fight, mortals suffer. I haven't seen those Miao people running faster than anyone else. If they get together at this time, they might become the victims between the two of them. At this time, he suddenly saw a sneaky figure out of the corner of his eye. It was Zhou Huazheng. He looked around furtively for a while, then turned around and plunged into the grass on the other side, apparently wanting to go under the waterfall. Seeing this, Su Tong and Captain Wan couldn't help but look at each other, and he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Let them fight, let's go see what the guy named Zhou is up to. As they spoke, the two groped behind Zhou Huazheng, and saw him groping forward in the bushes. As they walked, they murmured to themselves, a bunch of fools, who would hide the treasure so openly. The real one, treasures are hidden in inconspicuous places. Zhou Huazheng said as he carefully identified the plants in the bushes. When he saw a red manzushawa plant, his eyes suddenly lit up. He arranged his hair and stepped forward. I saw him searching around in the woods for a while, and actually found an inconspicuous path. Hey, I knew it had to be this. When Zhou Huazheng saw the small road, he immediately slapped his thigh, took small steps, and wanted to hum a few songs. He walked down layer by layer until he reached the place near the waterfall. When he turned around, he saw an empty hall in front of him. It was so dark inside the main hall that you couldn't see your fingers. Because of the angle, if you hadn't walked under the waterfall, you wouldn't have seen that there was a main hall here. Hee, it's true. The flower of the other shore is the guiding flower. This is the real treasure. Zhou Huazheng walked to the main hall and saw the torch hanging nearby. His eyes lit up and he stepped forward to take it off, then rummaged in his pocket. Hey! Where's the lighter? He fumbled in his pocket for a long time, but found to his embarrassment that there was only smoke but no fire. Suddenly his forehead began to sweat, and he fumbled again without giving up. Just when he was feeling embarrassed about the lighter, a lighter was suddenly presented to him. Joe Hwashin's eyes lit up when he saw the familiar lighter. He was about to reach out to pick it up, but his hand froze in mid-air. With a stiff neck, he turned around, and a smiling face that made him hate him to the core came into view. "Hey, look, old man, I'm here again." Su Tong grinned and his playful eyes made Joe Hwashin's head buzz, and his mood instantly hit rock bottom. "It's you again. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 53. Looking at Su Tong in front of him, Joe Hwashin's heart simply collapsed. It's like you couldn't hold back the little flame in your heart and dialed the number of the card. Then you met the annoying female technician and finished the job with a helpless sigh. So you got a new card the next day. And it turns out, wow, it's still her. That feeling was simply terrible. Joe Hwashung now saw that Su Tong was already making rapid calculations in his mind on how to stay away from this guy. But after thinking carefully for 30 seconds, he found that he had no choice. "Hey, old man, you are really knowledgeable and thoughtful. You have found such a hidden place. If it were you, we would still be stupid enough to go up there now." Su Tong was not stingy with his words of praise. Of course, while praising him, he also helped the old man light the torch in his hand. "Master, please." He bent down, stretched out his arms gracefully, and made an invitation gesture for Joe Hwashung, as if he was sincerely inviting Joe Hwashung to come onto the dance floor and dance with him. Seeing this, Joe Hwashung gritted his teeth and wanted to tear this guy's head off. It was a pity that he had neither the strength nor the courage, so in the end he could only walk into the hall in front of him with a dark face. I saw him throwing the torch in his hand into the ditch at hand. Boom! Suddenly, a fire exploded in the trench, and then the fire burned like a dragon quickly along the trench. After a while, the flames in the trench were completely ignited, and the raging fire lit up the hall in front of them. It turned out that there was actually a thick layer of grease stored in the trenches on both sides. Once ignited, it was enough to illuminate the entire hall. Hiss! Looking at the magnificent palace in front of them, although the three of them were mentally prepared, they were still shocked by the scene in front of them. There is a huge statue of a god carved on the main hall, but it is not the familiar god, but a man with a human face and bull horns, holding a big sword. Under the statue of the god, there are 4 crystal carved mirrors standing in a circle. Strictly speaking, there should be 6 mirrors. But 2 of the crystal mirrors had been broken by Lazy Yao. The mirror reflected the flames, as if they were burning on it. And in the center, surrounded by these mirrors, a coffin is lying quietly among them. But when Joe Hwashung saw the coffin clearly, his excited face suddenly fell. He saw that the coffins around the coffin had been pried open, and the lid of the coffin had also been opened. How so? He was startled, and after a moment of stunned expression, he couldn't help but look in pain. His eyes were as red as blood, and he cursed sternly, "The tomb robbers of the evil god must die a happy death." No wonder he was so angry. After all, the treasure he had cherished for so many years was unexpectedly taken by someone else. Anyone else would have an explosive mentality. Su Tong and Captain Wang looked at each other, and they immediately realized that this coffin was the empty coffin mentioned in the diary. Looking at the mess all over the ground, it seems that it was actually Huki who did it. In other words, this is already a place Huki has explored. Thinking of this, Su Tong suddenly felt disappointed. If this was really the case, there seemed to be no point in exploring here anymore. But Joe Hwashung did not give up. He walked up to the coffin, placed his trembling palms on the coffin, and cautiously stuck his head out to take a look inside. This is... Suddenly, Joe Hwashung's expression turned strange, his head buried in the coffin, and he seemed to be muttering something, but neither he nor Captain Wang could hear clearly. Upon seeing this, Captain Wang couldn't help but frown, and when he was about to step forward to see what Zhou Huazheng was up to, Su Tong's pupils suddenly tightened, and he grabbed Captain Wang's arm and pulled him back. "Don't go there." His voice was low, but the hand holding Captain Wang was as tight as an iron hoop. Team Wang could even feel the muscles in his arms beating uneasily. Looking back at Su Tong in confusion, he saw Su Tong's expression was particularly strange. His eyes were staring straight ahead, but he was retreating step by step. Sensing Captain Wang's confused gaze, he didn't explain anything. He just pointed at the crystal mirrors around Zhou Huazheng. Following the direction he pointed, Captain Wang raised his head and looked. He didn't see anything wrong at first, but as he looked, Captain Wang's face gradually began to look unnatural. Even his whole body couldn't help but stiffen, and every hair on his face could be seen with the naked eye standing on end. I saw Zhou Huazheng in the mirror, either squatting or standing aside and watching. The expressions in each mirror were completely different. But in fact, Zhou Huazheng was lying next to the coffin from beginning to end and made no other moves at all. In other words, the shadows in these mirrors, they are all alive. This inevitably reminded them of the 6 characters written in blood on the last page of the diary: "Beware of shadows, run." At the thought of this, Captain Wang's blood ran cold, and he opened his mouth to call Zhou Huazheng, but Su Tong covered his mouth. "Don't shout." However, Captain Wang's voice still made the shadows in the mirror startled. For a moment, these shadows actually turned their heads and glanced towards the 2 people with a somewhat suspicious look. Seeing the empty hall, these shadows showed a bit of suspicion on their faces, as if they were alive. They stared carefully for a long time before finally turning their faces away. Such a weird scene makes people's scalp numb. Only then did Su Tong understand why he said to be careful of shadows. He vaguely felt that Huki's death seemed to be related to these shadows. Thinking of this, Su Tong couldn't hold back his curiosity. He carefully poked his head out and took a closer look. Zhou Huazheng was lying on the coffin, still talking to himself, without noticing his own shadow, which was already starting to move. "To save or not to save?" Captain Wang lowered his voice and asked cautiously. Su Tong said nothing, staring at the mirrors. "To be honest, I'm not sure about saving him, but if I don't save him and let Zhou Huazheng die here, who knows what problems will arise." After hesitating for a while, Su Tong finally decided to save Zhou Huazheng. It's not that he is kind, but that he is worried that if Zhou Huazheng dies here, it may cause big problems. When he thinks of Huki's death, he feels a strong sense of uneasiness in his heart. This strong uneasiness made Su Tong's expression become even weirder. He couldn't help but draw a strange picture in his mind. In the dark cave, the freeze-dried corpse slowly raised its head, but the face of the corpse was not Huki, but he himself. His empty eyes slowly looked at himself. He put his raised index finger lightly on his lips, shh. With a playful smile, he raised his palm, put the dagger between his throat, and slashed hard. Puff. The blade cut open the aorta, and blood sprinkled on the cheeks like rain. The remaining warmth of the blood dripped on the face, nourishing the lonely soul for thousands of years. The scene was like a fountain of life, like an ancient sacrificial ceremony. As he thought about it, he couldn't help but become a little obsessed. "Xiao Chen! Xiao Chen!" Captain Wang couldn't hear Su Tong's voice and couldn't help but look back and almost peed in fright. I saw that the expression on his face was getting weirder and weirder. I don't know how to describe it. Is he laughing or crying? He had an intoxicated look, just like those drug addicts who are addicted to drugs. In such a strange place, Captain Wang suddenly made such a strange expression. Not to mention that Captain Wang was very upset. While shaking his arm, he murmured in his mind, "Is this some kind of attack?" Being shaken by Captain Wang's move, Su Tong gradually woke up from his narcissism. He ignored Captain Wang's weird look on his face and saw two paper figures appearing in his hand with a handful of his fingers. He took out 4 more rolls of yellow paper, which were more than 1 meter long when unfolded. Fortunately, I had purchased a lot of paper stamps in order to practice paper figurines, and now I finally put them to use. Su Tong cut these yellow papers and took out the paper pulp and smeared them on. He gave 2 pieces to the paper man and 1 piece to Team Wang. I'll just cover the mirror with paper later. Are you ready? He pointed at the 4 crystal mirrors and said. In fact, there were supposed to be 6 mirrors, but the 2 mirrors facing their direction may have been broken by Huki, otherwise it would be difficult for them to sneak through it quietly. Captain Wang stared at Su Tong's butt in a daze, thinking that these yellow papers were okay, but where did he get this paste from? Hearing Su Tong's questioning voice in confusion, he was stunned for a moment and nodded quickly to express his understanding. Seeing this, Su Tong shook his wrist slightly, and saw 2 paper figures flying lightly holding the yellow paper, and silently groped towards the 2 mirrors on the side. Such a pity. Looking at the light paper man, Su Tong couldn't help thinking that the paper man could fly, but the weight it could carry was limited. Otherwise, wouldn't it be great if he could drag himself up 1 foot at a time? Soon the paper figures were wound up separately on the left and right, and with a gentle twist, they pasted the yellow paper in their hands on the crystal mirror. Seeing the sudden yellow paper flying towards them, the shadows in the other 2 mirrors couldn't help but be startled. They suddenly made a sharp buzzing sound in their mouths, and actually stretched out their hands, as if they were about to rush out of the mirrors. Soon enough, Su Tong and Wang Dui rushed out from the corner, one on the left and the other on the right, and pasted the yellow paper in their hands directly on the mirror. I saw that the mirror covered with yellow paper was being pushed up continuously, and an outline without facial features appeared on the yellow paper. Go to hell! Wang Dui punched him, but his own fist was extremely painful. Su Tong, on the other hand, controlled 2 paper figures, took yellow paper and paper pulp, and painted them layer by layer. In the blink of an eye, he added 2 thick layers of yellow paper to the 4 mirrors. This time, the shadow in the mirror struggled several times but failed to come out. It could only growl weakly through the thick yellow paper. After doing this, Su Tong turned around and signaled Team Wang to pull Zhou Hua's hung out quickly. Old man Zhou, stop looking and leave quickly. Captain Wang walked up to Zhou Hua's hung and reached out to pull his head out of the coffin, but when he looked at the coffin, a scene that made Captain Wang's hair stand on end appeared. There was actually a corpse lying in the coffin that was supposed to be empty, and the corpse's face was exactly the same as mine. Sorry, I should have finished writing last night. I wrote it until 2 o'clock in the morning, so I wanted to climb down and have a rest, thinking about a break, no, thinking about an ending, but, my quilt suddenly hugged me and said it was too lonely, so it refused to let me get up, and then, I fell asleep and slept until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Ahem, I am getting older. I hope everyone can understand. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shuigan Xiao. Chapter 54. The exact same face, no matter the facial features or facial features, seemed to be copied 1-to-1. He was lying peacefully in the coffin, with a big red flower hanging on his chest and a first-class liberation medal in his hands. It was something he had only dreamed of obtaining. Watching it, Captain Wang actually became crazy. After Su Tong had finished pasting the paper, he looked back and saw that, good fellow, Captain Wang was already prostrate on the coffin like Zhou Hua's hung, with a look of infatuation on his face. Seeing this, he tilted his neck and stepped forward with a greeting on his face. He looked into the coffin and saw that there was no body in the coffin as written in Mr. Huqi's diary. However, although the coffin was empty, there were layers of thick silk-like things inside. Su Tong looked at it for a long time and couldn't figure out why. Seeing Zhou Huazheng and Captain Wang's faces full of infatuation, they simply kicked the coffin and turned it over. AHH. My baby. Seeing the coffin being kicked over, Joe Washington went crazy. He turned around with red eyes and reached out to fight Su Tong. As a result, as soon as his hand reached halfway, he was knocked to the ground by Su Tong's merciless slap. The hot slap made Joe Huashen's eyes flash with stars. He covered his head with one hand and fell to the ground hard. Shit baby, take a closer look at what that is. Hearing Su Tong's scolding, he took a closer look and saw that what was scattered out of the coffin was not the gold, silver, and jade he had just seen, but just a large piece of white cotton silk. How could this happen? How could this happen? Where are those treasures? Where are those antiques? Zhou Huazheng rushed forward, reached out, and groped in the coffin, but found nothing except cotton silk. For a moment, his whole spirit seemed to collapse. As for Captain Wang on the side, he immediately woke up after being stunned for a while. He looked at the empty coffin and remained silent for a long time, as if he was thinking about something. There was actually some clarity in his expression. He claimed to be the patron saint of the people, but he didn't expect that he was first attacked in the temple above. He saw himself being skinned and cramped and thrown into a frying pan. He hated evil and felt the fear of being cut to pieces with 1,000 knives. This is one side of him, and it should be the evil in his heart. Finally, he lay in the coffin, enjoying the admiration of the people. This is the greed on the other side of my heart. These problems that he usually didn't notice were now magnified hundreds of times in front of him, and he couldn't even withstand the slightest temptation. Thinking about it carefully at this moment, I couldn't help but sweat for myself, muttering in my heart that when this matter is over, I must sign up for an ideological awareness class to make up for myself. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but look at Su Tong. Why don't you have any influence? Su Tong curled his lips and looked at the empty coffin. After thinking for a moment, he could only spread his hands with a blank expression on his face. While the two were talking, Zhou Huazheng suddenly got up from the coffin. He was holding cotton wool in his hand, watching it carefully, and at the same time said to himself with confusion on his face, "Isn't it right? Isn't this wrong?" Seeing that Zhou Huazheng was still there talking to himself, Team Wang simply stepped forward and said, "Mr. Zhou, there is nothing wrong. Everything is an illusion. It is the greed in our hearts that is causing trouble. We must stick to the path of social communism." Hearing Captain Wang's words, Zhou Huazheng rolled his eyes, smiled scornfully as if he was looking at an idiot, and said, "A fool like you may not be able to become a general in 3 lifetimes." After saying that, he pushed away the surprised Captain Wang, walked around the coffin and began to examine the coffin carefully. While inspecting the coffin, he explained to the two people, "This is wrong, this coffin is not the main coffin at all. Not the main coffin." After hearing this, Captain Wang finally regained the sensitivity that a police sergeant should have. "You mean we have been searching for a long time, or are we looking in the wrong place? It's not like I found the wrong place. This should be a companion tomb. I'm afraid only the wife of the tomb owner can be buried here," Zhou Huazheng said with a blushing face. After all, not long ago he was confident that this was the main tomb, but he didn't expect to be slapped in the face so soon. "This is not the main tomb, so where is this place?" Su Tong asked standing aside. Don't be anxious, let me take a look." Zhou Huazheng lay on the coffin and carefully studied the tadpole-like words on it. Although his character was worrying, it had to be said that his profound knowledge in archaeological research was unparalleled. Even today's Shenmiao, no one can recognize a few of these words, but Zhou Huazheng can not only recognize them, but also carefully figure out the meaning. This is of course also due to the romantic and interesting things that happened in this Miao territory back then. After watching for a moment, Zhou Huashen's expression became more solemn. "What did you understand?" Tell me now, Captain Wang stamped his feet anxiously on the sidelines, hating boring gourds like Zhou Huazheng the most. This. Zhou Huazheng frowned and lifted the lid of the coffin on the side. See for yourselves. Su Tong and Captain Wang came over to take a look, and saw that the coffin lid was actually covered with dark red scratches. Seeing this, the two people looked at each other and said in unison, "Buried alive." Yes, a living person was buried. This coffin was not buried with him. It should be said to be a test object. The words engraved on the coffin seem to be related to witchcraft. Simply put, it means using a living person to ascend to immortality. Zhou Huazheng pointed to the cotton-like things in the coffin, and his eyes gradually became hot. These are the shells he retreated from. It shouldn't be said to be feathers, it should be said to be insects, and the insects turned into immortals. Insect. Su Tong and Captain Wan couldn't help but look at each other. They both thought of the female corpses they encountered. Could it be said that those female corpses are immortals? But when I think about it, I feel it's not quite right. If that's really the case, Huqi should have written it in his diary long ago. Thinking of this, Su Tong tilted his head and looked at Zhou Huazheng. Seeing that he was hesitant to speak, he frowned and stepped forward to grab Zhou Huashan's hair. Zhou Huazheng panicked and quickly covered his head with his hands. What are you doing? Honestly, what else have you not told me about? Su Tong stared at him with cold eyes. He believed that Zhou Huazheng told the truth, but looking at his sneaky expression, he knew that this guy definitely didn't tell the truth. Let go first. Don't grab my hair. Seeing that he still refused to say anything, Su Tong turned around, pressed his head tightly against the mirror, and tore off the yellow paper with his hands. He saw another face of Zhou Huazheng clearly appearing in front of him in the mirror, but the expression on this face was completely different from Zhou Huashan's. There was a look of surprise on his face, and he came closer a little bit, and actually slowly stretched out his hand from the mirror and hugged his head. Suddenly, Zhou Huashan's whole body trembled. He felt like something was drilling into his flesh. An inexplicable sense of fear came over him, causing him to scream uncontrollably. I said, let go first let me go. Su Tong pulled his face up from the mirror. Seeing Zhou Huazheng in the mirror, he actually reached out to grab it. As a result, Su Tong held a piece of yellow paper in his hand and put it back into the mirror for him. I said, let go of my hair first. Zhou Huazheng covered his head tightly with both hands and begged Su Tong for mercy, half crying. Su Tong snorted coldly, and after letting go of Zhou Huashan's hair, he calmly arranged his hairstyle before saying, it's the reincarnation goo. Hearing this name, Su Tong's heart suddenly skipped a beat, and he nodded for Zhou Huazheng to continue. You must have heard of the reincarnated Buddha mentioned in Tantric Buddhism. In fact, this is similar to Buddhism. They turn people into insects. When the insects parasitize on people, their consciousness will also transfer there. As long as they continue to parasitize, it can be reincarnated again and be immortal for eternity. Then take a look, is it this? Su Tong took out the egg directly from the prop book and handed it to Zhou Huazheng to let him see what it was. Where does this come from? Seeing this egg, Zhou Huashan's eyes gleamed. He carefully groped and studied the egg. After a moment, he shook his head. This is not the reincarnation goo. This should be a failed product of the reincarnation goo. The more Zhou Huazheng watched, the more he couldn't put it down. The real reincarnation goo not only retains the memory of life, but is also invisible and colorless. It can quickly occupy the human body and occupy the human consciousness, and it will not be noticed even if it is exposed to the air. Upon hearing this, Su Tong took the egg back and threw it into the prop book. To his surprise, after being touched by Zhou Huazheng, this insect egg full of question marks actually had a note. Immortality goo. there is a certain probability that the failed work of reincarnation goo will retain some memories of life. Special Ability 1, Symbiosis. Once swallowed, the eggs will quickly infect the host. Once the symbiosis is successful, the immortality goo will bring great benefits to the host. Note, please develop it yourself. If the symbiosis fails, the host will lose consciousness and gradually become a parasite of the immortality goo. The risk level is extremely high, please do not attempt it unless you are fully prepared. Note, this item is a special prop item and has precious resource properties. If you sell it to the script library, you will get unexpected benefits. Su Tong was startled. He didn't expect Zhou Huazheng to have the ability to appraise, but after thinking about it carefully, he was relieved. He himself is very knowledgeable, and he once had a forbidden love with Shen Miao. He has a great foundation in the legends and writings of the Miao people, so he naturally has the ability to identify. Being able to be reincarnated again and again, isn't it no different from being immortal? Isn't there any disadvantage? Asked Team Wang, who didn't believe in evil. Have. Zhou Huazheng nodded affirmatively, pointed to the coffin and said, this reincarnation goo is only a semi-finished product. It is clearly written on it that after a few years of parasitism, the parasite must complete some kind of ritual or devour the same kind. Only then can the transformation be completely completed. Hearing these words, Su Tong couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Please tell me clearly, how many years have it been? 6, no, it should be 5 years. Zhou Huazheng looked back at the time recorded on the coffin and said to Su Tong. Hearing these words, Su Tong's lips twitched. All kinds of doubts flashed through his mind. He couldn't help but laugh. He finally understood in his heart, it turns out that the ghost she was talking about was not a lost dog. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 55. Su Tong stood there and began to review the entire script again in his mind. In a daze, he suddenly remembered something, reached out and took out the little book from his prop book, and put it in his hand. Looking at this little book without a name, Su Tong suddenly understood. At this moment, as the last piece of the puzzle fell into place in my mind, the script in front of me suddenly became clear. Sure enough, the best hunters often appear as prey. He took a deep breath and suddenly turned around. Let's go. Hey. Where are you going? Captain Wang saw him leaving suddenly and followed him without knowing why. Of course we're going to pick up the bargains. If we don't leave, we're afraid we won't even have any soup left, he said casually. When Zhou Huazheng heard that he was picking up a bargain, his eyes lit up and he immediately followed him. After the three people climbed up from below, they found that Huo Ying and the others could no longer be found, but if they listened carefully, they could still hear bursts of fighting sounds, vaguely echoing nearby. It was obvious that they were not far from here. They should be nearby. Should we go help? Team Wang looked around, but Zhou Huazheng screamed, no. His face was livid, and he thought it was an advantage, but if he was going to help deal with Huo Ying, he would definitely not go. You don't know how powerful the bloodthirsty bees are. He relied on those bloodthirsty bees to massacre the entire Miao village. Thinking of what happened back then, he still couldn't help but shudder. No, we don't need to help. Let's go up and take a look first. Su Tong pointed to the magnificent palace standing beside the waterfall in the distance. But Team Wang wanted to say something else, but Su Tong had already stepped forward, so he had no choice but to follow him. The three of them stepped on the steps paved with gold and climbed up one level at a time until they reached the 9th floor. Then a huge arched door suddenly appeared, and natural crystal stones of various colors shone densely around it. In the distance, the hall is magnificent, with lights like daylight. There is a huge golden door at the end of the hall. The people standing in front of the door turned out to be Yang Guanjin and Old Bart. There was mist all around, and the two stood in front of the golden gate. They didn't know how long they had been here. Captain Wang was about to step forward to say hello, but Su Tong grabbed his arm. "Don't go there." Zhou Huazheng wanted to follow him forward, but when he heard these words, he immediately stepped back alertly. After the two took a few steps back, Captain Wang suddenly saw a large pool of blood spilled under old Bart's feet. "You're here after all." Yang Guanjin turned around and saw Su Tong. The dimples on his face became deeper. He had a red mouth and white teeth, and his smile was sweeter than a Xinjiang cantaloupe. He looked carefully at Yang Guanjin's body and couldn't help but frown. "How should I call you now? Master Hu Qi? Or Yang Guanjin? Or, Reincarnation Gu?" He didn't choose to go around in circles and ask straight to the point. Yang Guanjin was stunned for a moment and shook his head. "I am Yang Guanjin, Yang Guanjin is me. Who is Hu Qi? I don't recognize him." But Yang Guanjin changed his words immediately. "But if you say it was the old guy from 30 years ago, I have a bit of an impression. I thought he could take me out, but he actually chose to commit suicide, which made me suffer again. Spent 25 years in that thief's cave." "What?" Yang Guanjin's words shocked Team Wang and Joe Washington. The two of them didn't expect that Yang Guanjin was actually a reincarnation Gu. "That's right." Zhou Huazheng suddenly remembered something and slapped his thigh. "Old Bart said you came here 5 years ago. Could it be?" Chapter 16, Paragraph 6. When Zhou Huazheng said this, Captain Wang immediately remembered it and nodded. "Yes, that's what he said at the time." After the two of them finished speaking, their hearts froze. They never dreamed that Yang Guanjin would be related to reincarnation Gu. "The golden dagger, did you deliberately bring it out to trick us?" Zhou Huazheng was not stupid. After understanding Yang Guanjin's identity, his face suddenly turned bright and dark and he took a few steps back. Yang Guanjin's eyes turned cold and he stared straight at Zhou Huazheng. "Yes, I have read all the news about you becoming famous all over the country in recent years. You are the president of the Chinese Ancient Chu Culture Association and a top professor of Chinese antiques. Oh, it seems that Tsinghua University also has your exclusive lecture. It's really beautiful." Listening to Yang Guanjin counting his titles one by one, Zhou Huaxin's face suddenly became even more ugly. "I saw Yang Guanjin pointing at the golden door in front of him. All the treasures you want are here, come and get them." "No. I don't want it, I don't want it anymore." Zhou Huazheng waved his hands repeatedly and kept retreating. He didn't want anything now, he just wanted to leave this ghost place right away. As he said this, he turned around and was about to walk down. However, when he turned around, he suddenly froze on the spot. The golden steps they came up from were actually gone at this moment. What replaced it was an abyss. "How so?" Zhou Huazheng rubbed his eyes vigorously with both hands. He couldn't believe his eyes. He even dropped the backpack from his waist. Seeing the backpack disappear into the waterfall below without even a wave, Zhou Huaxin's heart completely went cold. He turned around in horror and threw himself behind Captain Wang. "Save me, you have to save me. I am a professor in our country. If there is anything wrong with me, you will not be able to escape the involvement." Captain Wang pushed him to the ground in disgust and looked sideways at Yang Guanjin, who was smiling but not smiling. Then looking at Zhou Huaxin's guilty look, he knew that what was going on here was not that simple. "Tell me, what's going on?" he asked sternly. What's going on? I'm just an archaeology professor. I've never done anything harmful." Zhou Huazheng is a tough talker. At this point, he still refuses to tell the truth. Upon seeing this, Captain Wang stepped forward and grabbed his hair, imitating Su Tong, and pulled him to the edge of the stone platform. "If you don't tell me, I'll throw you away." Looking at the rolling waterfall under the abyss in front of him, Zhou Huazheng felt dizzy. He covered his head tightly with his hands and cried out, "I really don't know anything, no matter what my business is." After he finished speaking, Captain Wang pulled half of Zhou Huashan's body out of the stone fence with a strong pull, and his face suddenly turned pale. His legs trembled, and with a wisp of yellow water flowing out of his trousers, Zhou Huasheng finally said, "I'll say it, I'll say it." But Team Wang did not let him go, but instead pulled him much tighter. This week, Huasheng didn't even have time to edit, so he could only bite the bullet and said, "It was me, I was the one who poisoned me. I just wanted to escape. I had no other ideas. I didn't know that the poison Huo Ying gave me would be so, it's scary, he just told me that anyone who drinks it will fall asleep." It turns out that after Zhou Huasheng was rescued by the group of Shen Miao in the mountains, he felt that this was a rare opportunity that would allow him to learn more about the world of Shen Miao. Even as time passed, he gradually developed feelings for the saint in the Miao village. But as time passed day by day, Zhou Huashan's freshness about growing seedlings was gradually worn away bit by bit. He discovered that the so-called Miao Gu could only be passed on from female to male, and that the Gu seed was inherited under a mysterious ritual at birth. This made Zhou Washington feel disappointed when he originally wanted to know the magic of seedling growth. So he came up with a bold idea, which was to secretly take the child away. But how can a child be stolen? Just when he was troubled, a person came to him, and that was Huo Ying. Huo Ying was also the heir of the great Miali wizard, and he gave himself a pack of potion. He said that after taking this medicine, everyone would be asleep for a whole day, and then he could leave with the children. So at the ceremony when the child was 1 month old, Zhou Huasheng sprinkled the packet of medicine into the wine, then hugged the child and planned to leave. What he never expected was that Huo Ying led a group of foreigners to come in at this time, and everyone was slaughtered. That's what happened. I was also used. As soon as Zhou Huasheng finished speaking, Captain Wang slapped him in the face. "Bah, what the hell, someone saved you, and you actually repaid him with kindness." Zhou Huasheng lowered his head and dared not speak. At this time, Su Tong suddenly said, "You want to take the child away? Why do you want to take it back?" Hearing Su Tong's words suddenly, Zhou Huashan's expression changed, and he quickly explained, "I don't want my child to live in this barbaric mountain, so I have to take her away to raise her." After he finished speaking, Su Tong pointed to old Bart, who had closed his eyes next to Yang Guanjin. "Then how did she fall into old Bart's hands?" Hearing this, Zhou Huashan's expression became even more unnatural. Team Wang was a criminal police officer himself. Seeing his guilty look, his heart was shocked and he immediately guessed this guy's purpose. He immediately lifted him up and glared at Zhou Huashan's old face. "You want to take out her poison, right? Me?" When the secret in his heart was revealed, Zhou Huasheng was confused and didn't know what to say. You, tiger poison cannot eat its seeds. You took her Gu seed to kill her. How dare you say you don't know?" Team Wang's eyes immediately turned red. He threw Zhou Huasheng to the ground, raised his fist and hit him. He had seen murderers and robbers who would not let go of old ladies, but he had never seen such a cruel father, whose heart was even more poisonous than a scorpion. Perhaps he was frightened, but Zhou Huasheng didn't know where he got the strength from. He pushed Team Wang away and stood up to run. As a result, as soon as he ran 2 steps forward, he saw a figure suddenly rushing towards him in the mist. After the two collided, Zhou Huashan's small body was directly knocked into the air, and his body was hit directly and impartially on the raised crystal on the side. Puff! The sharp crystal stone penetrated directly into his chest, causing Zhou Huashan's pupils to tighten, and the severe pain made his body stiffen. Zhou Huasheng opened his mouth, and his hoarse voice revealed his struggle for life. He stretched out his hands desperately, trying to grab something forward. His bloodshot eyes were staring at the wig that was thrown away at his feet. Seeing his hand getting closer and closer. Whoa, but he saw a hand suddenly pick up the wig before him. Zhou Huasheng raised his head, but what caught his eye was Su Tong's smiling face. Hey! Looking at this smiling face, Zhou Huashan's face froze, and then Su Tong suddenly raised his hand and threw the wig away. Fly! Don't want! Zhou Huasheng, who was bareheaded, suddenly raised his head, looked at the wig that had been thrown away, and stretched out his hand feebly. However, when his hand was halfway out, it still dropped heavily. Sorry, I originally wrote 2 chapters, but I deleted 1 chapter because I felt that writing 1 chapter about the fight between Huo Ying and Yang Zixuan had no meaning in advancing the plot, so I deleted and rewritten it, resulting in I'm sorry for the late update today. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 56. Zhou Huasheng died suddenly, but now it was too late for everyone to feel sad about his death. After seeing Xiong Tao, Yang Zixuan also stumbled up. When he saw Su Tong and others in front of him, Yang Zixuan was startled for a moment. Just as he was about to speak, a big blue-gray hand suddenly emerged from the mist and grabbed Yang Zixuan. Go to hell! Seeing this, Xiong Tao's whole body shone with dazzling golden light, and his whole body was like a little golden man plated with gold. He shouted violently, the muscles on his arms bulged, and he used all his strength to grab the thick and powerful arm. However, at this moment, several venomous snakes suddenly emerged from the blue-gray arm. The poisonous snake opened its mouth and bit down. The sharp fangs failed to pierce Xiong Tao's muscles, but the venom splashed on the muscles, causing Xiong Tao to scream immediately. His arm was suddenly corroded by the venom, and his face turned pitch black soon after. Then Huo Ying kicked the person out and strode out of the mist, holding Yang Zixuan in his hand. A few sparse white hairs were dancing in the wind, and there were already more than a dozen scars on his body, but Huo Ying's face always remained calm. These scars were scattered all over the place, totaling more than 10 places, large and small, but the strange thing was that not a drop of blood came out. You are very strong, even as strong as me, but I can always be this strong, but you can't. Looking at Yang Zixuan, whose hands were getting weaker and weaker, Huo Ying opened his mouth to praise, but this was more of a trampling and contempt for Yang Zixuan's self-esteem than a compliment. It's like 2 brothers, the same length, the same hardness, but not as durable as the elder brother. Are you angry or not? Of course, there is a reason why Huo Ying can maintain his intensity unchanged. I saw black flying insects surrounding him. These flying insects kept landing on his wounds. A long black needle on his abdomen was inserted into the wound, as if something had been injected into the wound. The wounds are actually recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. But these flying insects did not die immediately like bees, but quickly flew up and began to search for targets around them. When he saw several flying insects rushing towards him, Su Tong frowned, pulled up the king's team and quickly dodged back, waved his hand to summon the power of the devil, and then drove the insects away with the light of the magic flame. However, these flying insects immediately turned around and quickly pounced on Zhou Huashan's body. The dense flying insects quickly engulfed Zhou Huashan's body, but dispersed again in the blink of an eye. Everyone took a closer look, and the expressions on their faces suddenly changed. They saw that Zhou Huashan's body had been dried and stir-fried, and it looked like a pool of human skin hanging on the crystal. This is the terrifying thing about bloodthirsty bees. No wonder Yang Guanjin and the Miao people ran faster than the other when they saw this thing. Huo Ying waved his hand to call the insects back to him, looking up at the gorgeous palace in front of him. When he saw the golden door at the end of the palace, Huo Ying's eyes couldn't help but shine with a burning light. Take out the keys. He opened his hand towards Yang Zixuan and said. The so-called key refers to the golden dagger, which is why he killed Yang Zixuan without any restrictions. Take out the antidote first. Yang Zixuan spat coldly, but Huo Ying ducked away. He glared at Huo Ying fiercely, and even now, he still had no intention of giving in. However, unexpectedly, Huo Ying was very cooperative this time, and without even saying a word of nonsense, he reached out and took out 4 small medicine bottles from his pocket. Ken. As he spoke, he threw Yang Zixuan in the direction of the Golden Gate, and at the same time threw the medicine bottle in his hand towards the king's team. Looking at the medicine bottle flying towards him, Captain Wang subconsciously reached out to catch it. Don't answer. Su Tong seemed to have noticed something, but before he could step forward to stop him, a stream of air quickly passed behind him. The strong sense of oppression forced him to stop and throw himself forward without thinking. Go out. The moment he flew out, a black stone knife almost grazed his scalp and cut it. When he got up and took a look, he saw Captain Wang standing in a corner not far away, holding 4 medicine bottles in his hands, but he didn't dare to move. The densely packed bloodthirsty bees were forming a large net covering his body. Captain Wang's eyes widened. He could even clearly see the insects, their sharp mouth parts, and every tiny pattern on their bodies. There was no need to have any doubt, as long as Huo Ying moved his fingers, these bugs would suck him into dried meat in just a few breaths. Take it, this is their life. Huo Ying walked aside with a smile on his face, keeping a certain distance from Captain Wang. You go and open the door. As long as you open the door, the medicine is yours. This is called fairness. Huo Ying looked at the golden door in front of him, his eyes becoming hot. As for Su Tong, Xiang Tao on the ground, and even Yang Guanjin, they were completely insignificant in Huo Ying's eyes. Yang Zixuan got up, glanced at the golden door, looked back at the medicine bottle in Captain Wang's hand, and took out the golden dagger from the prop book with an expressionless face. If you open the door, everyone will die. Yang Guanjin stood aside and watched coldly, reminding him abruptly. Yang Zixuan's hand suddenly trembled, and he turned his head to look at her suspiciously. I'll drive it. She opened her hand and motioned for Yang Zixuan to hand her the key. However, Huo Ying on the side stopped him and said, No. You have to drive it. He can't fight. The door needs to be twisted 12 times. The position of each twist is different. The more you twist, the harder it is. Look at his appearance now. Are you sure he can twist it? Once he stops, if you come down, not only will all your previous efforts be wasted, but your organs will also be touched. Yang Guanjin said to Huo Ying. Yang Zixuan took a closer look, and sure enough, there was indeed a very strange mark on the golden door. His heart sank, and he suddenly had a bad feeling. How do you know this? Huo Ying walked towards Yang Guanjin. His mountain-like body was in stark contrast to Yang Guanjin's frail figure. If I told you, I am Wukaj, would you believe it? Yang Guanjin raised his head and said an unfamiliar name. If Zhou Huaguo were still alive, he would have been extremely shocked when he heard this name. This name has neither been recorded in history nor has any documentation. But for Shen Miao, it is no less than a god. Seeing the woman in front of him speaking out legendary names without shame, Huo Ying's blue-gray face already showed a few wrinkles, signs of wanting to smile. But at this moment, Yang Guanjin suddenly spoke and recited a very strange spell with an extremely loquacious pronunciation. Hearing such a spell, the smile on Huo Ying's face suddenly dropped, and he looked at Yang Guanjin with wide eyes. That is an ancient mantra passed down among the Miao witches. It is only passed on to the next generation by the Miao shamans before they die. There is no written record of this mantra and it is all passed down orally. He is already the last generation of Miao shamans in Shen Miao. In theory, only he should know this spell. You only know this incantation, but you don't understand the meaning of this sentence, so every year on the 15th day of the first lunar month, you feel extremely cold all over your body. You have to drink deer blood to survive, so your skin becomes like this, and it will become more and more serious. After you are 60 years old, the blood in your body will turn blue, and you will not be far from death by then. Yang Guanjin said calmly. This was a secret that only Miao Wu knew, but she easily revealed it. Huo Ying's eyes changed from shock to hesitation. But the hesitation only lasted for a moment. Huo Ying suddenly reached out and grabbed Yang Guanjin's throat, lifted her up from the ground, and sneered in a mature dialect, "Do you think I will believe you? If you don't believe me, you will all die." Yang Guanjin pointed to the platform suspended above the waterfall at his feet. "If you open it in the wrong way, the gate knife hidden in the gate will instantly cut off, cutting off the wooden beams below, and this place will collapse, disintegrate and bury us all here." After hearing Yang Guanjin's words, everyone's hearts tightened. If they looked closely, they would indeed see the stone platform under their feet. In fact, there were inconspicuous gaps in many places. Through the lines, they could indeed see the wooden beams below. Huo Ying's expression remained unchanged, but he glanced at the solace of his feet from the corner of his eye. With such a high distance and the countless stones falling down here, even if he is really a god, he will definitely die. "I do not believe you." Huo Ying put her down and pointed to Su Tong aside, "Go and open the door." "I." Su Tong raised his eyebrows slightly and looked at Yang Guanjin. Yang Guanjin nodded and said, "Okay, but I will only tell him the order of opening the door." Huo Ying hesitated for a moment, but thought that he still held a trump card in his hand, so he nodded and pushed Yang Guanjin into Su Tong's arms. "Hurry up." When he hooked his finger, the bloodthirsty bee surrounding Team King immediately tightened up. Team King could even see that the long black mouthpart on the bridge of his nose was already attached to his pores, as if it would prick him at any time. "Same as going in. Don't play tricks, or he will be you after him," Huo Ying threatened. Yang Guanjin patted his shoulder and whispered a few words in his ear. Su Tong raised his head suspiciously and silently clenched his fists. "Don't worry, I won't harm you, trust me." Yang Guanjin raised his head and faced Su Tong's questioning gaze calmly. "It's best," he said, walking up to Yang Zixuan. The two of them held the handle of the knife together, pointed it at the key on the door in front of them, and slowly inserted it in. Kaka kaka. As the blade continued to be inserted into the key, the crisp friction sound of the mechanism continued to sound. "Third square from the left." Su Tong whispered, and slowly twisted the handle of the knife in his hand. As the tiger head on the handle gradually aligned with the third position, the golden door in front of him suddenly made a crisp buzzing sound. The door in front of me actually slowly opened a gap. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 57. The door opens through a very small gap, but through the door gap, you can clearly see that it is empty inside, except for a stone statue standing there. "Quick! Quick! Keep going, keep going." Looking at the crack in the open door, Huo Ying's breathing began to become rapid, urging Su Tong to continue twisting the key. Second frame. Su Tong took a deep breath and continued to twist down. Kaka kaka. However, after twisting this time, the surrounding palace began to tremble violently. Immediately afterwards, his and Yang Zixuan's expressions changed, and they vaguely heard the sound of metal friction coming from behind the door, as if something had slipped. Boom! Soon a fierce collision confirmed the two people's suspicions. Not long ago, large pieces of stone bricks began to crack, and the cracks became bigger and bigger. Seeing a crack approaching the sole of his foot from a distance, Captain Wang's face instantly turned green. As for Huo Ying, he immediately grabbed Yang Guanjin's wrist. "What's going on? What the hell are you doing?" "No, there is nothing wrong with the sequence. Two beams must be broken to fully open the door." Yang Guanjin's wrist was held tightly by Huo Ying, with a very painful expression on his face, and he kept saying, "Don't stop, keep opening the door." Hearing this, Su Tong could only continue to twist with Yang Zixuan. As the tiger head on the handle gradually twisted to the sixth position, the vibrations in the palace gradually stopped, which made the two men feel relieved. Seeing the open door, which was as big as a fist, Huo Ying threw Yang Guanjin away, walked quickly to the door, and put his face up to take a closer look. After seeing the crystal box held by the statue, Huo Ying trembled with excitement. Yes, there is absolutely no mistake, that is the divine object that he has longed for, so close at hand, like a dream. Quick, keep going, he urged, eager to rush in and hold the divine object in his hand. However, Su Tong stopped at this moment and looked at Yang Zixuan. Have you ever seen how to threaten others? Yang Zixuan. Seeing the confused expression on his face, Su Tong grinned, showing his neat white teeth, and raised his head to look at Huo Ying. Give us the antidote first, don't forget, the time is coming, if something happens to us later, I accidentally twisted it in the wrong position. When Huo Ying heard this, the joy on his face disappeared for a moment, and he looked at Su Tong with sinister eyes. What did you say? Antidote? If you don't give me the antidote, I won't twist. Su Tong looked at him and repeated what he just said. Hiss. How dare you threaten me? Huo Ying was stunned and then sneered. Su Tong tilted his head and thought seriously for a moment, then simply removed his hand from the handle of the knife and opened his arms. No, to be precise, this is called blackmail. You take advantage of the other party's weakness and force the other party to agree to your request. If you don't speak Chinese well, I will give you a Xinhua dictionary another day. Huo Ying's eyes widened. He couldn't believe it. This guy actually dared to threaten him at this time. And he was so arrogant. He wanted to make a move, but Yang Zixuan suddenly coughed. He was covering his mouth with one hand, holding the handle of the knife tightly with the other hand, and glaring at him sideways. It was obvious what the threatening look meant. Aren't you afraid that I will kill you later? The flesh on Huo Ying's cheeks was twisting together. No one had ever dared to talk to him like this. Okay, come on. If you don't give me the antidote, you will die anyway. Kill me now, and kill him too, and then ask her to come and twist the key with you. After saying this, Su Tong suddenly remembered something and slapped his forehead. Oh, no, you can't loosen this key, right? It will bounce back once you loosen it. I don't know if your hand speed is fast enough. If not, you'd better get one hand is holding the key, and the other hand is pressing my head against the wall. As he said this, he put his head on the golden door and set an example for Huo Ying. It's like this. Seeing Su Tong acting like a rogue in front of him, Huo Ying opened his mouth and felt a little at a loss. After all, no one has ever dared to be so presumptuous in front of him. Even in the Han Miao village that he occasionally visited, the Han Miao people all hid when they saw him. Some Han Miao people who knew his identity all regarded themselves as pious as gods in the clan. This is the first time he has encountered such tricks as playing rogue. But at this critical juncture, Huo Ying wanted to throw this guy to the bloodthirsty bees and suck him into a human being, but when he thought about it carefully, he realized that he really couldn't do this. Whirring. Huo Ying gasped loudly, and you could see the veins on Huo Ying's temples bulging. But at this time, Su Tong still had an indifferent attitude, as if you come and bite me, I stand here and let you bite me, will you bite me? Hey, your knife is pretty good. Just when Huo Ying's lungs were about to explode, Su Tong suddenly reached out and pulled out the stone knife from his waist and placed it on his aorta. This way, I have already thought about it. If you stab like this, with one knife, I will lie down immediately and die neatly, without delaying you at all. As he said this, he handed the knife to Huo Ying. Huo Ying took the knife and almost couldn't help but want to stab the bastard to death. But he didn't dare. Yang Zixuan was staring at him eagerly. He had already experienced Yang Zixuan's determination to ask for the antidote. As long as he dared to take action, Yang Zixuan would dare to die with him in the next moment. You. Huo Ying held up the knife. At this moment, he really had the urge to cut this kid into pieces. At this time, he looked at Yang Guanjin aside, and was about to have an attack, but found Yang Guanjin sitting on the ground, with a frighteningly pale look on his face. When he walked over and took a look, he was shocked to find that Yang Guanjin didn't know anything. By that time, I was no longer breathing. How so? Huo Ying's face changed drastically. He didn't want to kill Yang Guanjin. Although he didn't believe that Yang Guanjin was the legendary Wukage, he still had many doubts and wanted to ask her for clarification. But now, she is actually dead. This turn of events caught Huo Ying off guard for a moment, and he suddenly turned back to look at Su Tong. No wonder he was so confident, they must have colluded long ago. When he thought of this, Huo Ying instantly felt like he had fallen into a trap, and his eyes stared at him with a cold light. But despite the thousands of words he had to say, he still gritted his teeth and swallowed them back. After all, getting what he wanted was the most important thing. Thinking of this, he turned around and pointed at Captain Wang and said, "Give him the antidote." As he spoke, the bloodthirsty bees that originally surrounded Team King dispersed. Without the threat of bloodthirsty bees, Team King jumped out of the crack with small steps. Just now, his heart was hanging on his chest. It hurt my throat. He trotted all the way to Su Tong, handed him the antidote in his hand, kept a bottle open and swallowed it directly. "It's yours." Team Wang gave Su Tong a thumbs up, looked sideways at Huo Ying's face, and almost couldn't help laughing. He took 2 bottles of the antidote and motioned to Team Wang to give the remaining bottle to Xiong Tao, who was on the ground beside him. "Turn around and swallow the bottle of antidote directly. The sour taste is really a bit like the taste of bayberry." Not long after eating it, I received a prompt from the space. "The unknown parasite has died and will be excreted from the body within 24 hours. Please, expel it yourself." Although it was a bit strange to hear the prompt sound from the space, I have to say that it felt inexplicably reassuring. He looked down at Yang Zixuan again. I saw Yang Zixuan staring at him eagerly, meaning if you don't give it to me, I will start blackmailing you. Of course, he doesn't have the capital. After all, Yang Guanjin only told himself the order. "Want to?" He shook the bottle in his hand. Yang Zixuan's mouth twitched and he nodded helplessly. Su Tong was even happier now, and raised Yang Zixuan's chin. "Come on, I'll feed you." Yang Zixuan's eyes widened and he almost pulled out the dagger and gave this guy a knife. It would be better if he didn't sit on the boat of friendship. Seeing that Su Tong had already obtained the antidote and was still making a fuss, Huo Ying could hardly bear it any longer. "Hurry up." Seeing that Huo Ying was on the verge of going berserk, Su Tong glanced at the crystal box in the crack of the door and threw the medicine bottle in his hand to Yang Zixuan with a disappointed look on his face. Then he stretched out his hand to hold the handle of the knife and twisted it down hard. This time he directly twisted the handle of the knife to the 12th position, only to hear a clicking sound from the door. The golden door in front of me finally began to slowly open again. "Don't support me during this time, really don't do it, the follow-up is too low, there will be no resources if you cross the water, it will be put on the shelves in advance, please sign below, 1 report per person, the leaflet exceeds 50 people, please update." Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 58. Kick 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 kick. As the key continued to twist, the resistance it brought became stronger and stronger. Beads of sweat began to appear on the foreheads of Su Tong and Yang Zixuan. They wiped the sweat from their hands from time to prevent slipping. And the gap in the golden door in front of him is getting wider and wider, from the original width of a fist to half a person, and then until 2 people can stand side by side, the door is completely opened. As the light from outside shines in, a huge witch goddess statue stands in the hall, holding a brilliant crystal box in both hands. If you look carefully, you will find that the box shines brightly under the light. It is unclear what color it is. It makes people feel like their eyes are going to be dazzled after just a few glances. Seeing the treasure right in front of him, Huo Ying was surprisingly calm. He stared sideways at Su Tong and Yang Zixuan, taking in all their movements. Unless they are sure that they have turned the keyhole to 12 clicks, they will never take a step into the hall easily. The two of them naturally knew this very well, but at this moment, everyone had completely different thoughts. Su Tong turned the key in his hand silently, while Yang Zixuan focused more on the treasure box in the statue's hand. As for Captain Wang, he is still worried about the life and death of Xiong Tao. Even if he took the antidote could only eliminate the parasitic poison in Xiong Tao's stomach. The venom of the poisonous snake dissolved most of the muscles in his arms, and he fell into a coma. Captain Wang touched the black short knife in his arms and wondered whether he should give Xiong Tao a bone scraping to heal his wounds. Kick, click, click, click. At this moment, Su Tong and Yang Zixuan were startled because the keys in their hands could not be turned. Turn. There's still one space left. Huo Ying, who was standing behind, asked with a dark face, staring at Su Tong with murderous intent in his eyes. Obviously Su Tong's threat just now has made Huo Ying hate him to the core. No one has ever dared to talk to him like this, let alone threatening himself. Can't turn. Yang Zixuan frowned and turned with all his strength. Except for the slight rotation of the handle, there was no looseness at all. Yes, it feels a little hard. Su Tong responded with difficulty, his face turned red from suppressing it, and the veins on his arms were stretched straight, as if he had exerted himself to suck milk. Huo Ying stood in the back, still doubting whether these two people were acting with him here. Just seeing the bulging veins on their faces, I couldn't tell for a moment. Just when Huo Ying was thinking about whether to approach the main hall, a drop of sweat suddenly fell into the corner of Yang Zixuan's eye. The cold sweat made him jump and subconsciously stretched out his hand to wipe it away. However, just as he stretched out a hand to wipe away the sweat, Su Tong suddenly let go of his hand, jumped up and rushed towards the statue. Not good. The unexpected scene not only surprised Yang Zixuan, but also caught Huo Ying off guard. In just a short moment, his eyes first looked at the handle of the knife in Yang Zixuan's hand. After all, the key hadn't been turned 12 times, so naturally the first thing he worried about was touching the mechanism. Without Su Tong's support, the handle of the knife rebounded suddenly. Yang Zixuan was holding the handle of the knife with one hand and could not hold it at all. For a moment, he could only watch as the handle of the knife suddenly turned back to the previous position. Position. In an instant, Yang Zixuan's heart tightened and he held his breath involuntarily. However, after the knife handle rotated to the previous level, nothing happened in front of him. This time, whether it was Yang Zixuan or Huo Ying, they were stunned for a second before finally coming to their senses. Court death. Realizing that he had been fooled, Huo Ying jumped into the hall and became even more angry when he saw that Su Tong was about to climb up the statue. After his strong body bowed slightly, he kicked off his legs full of explosive power and appeared in front of Su Tong almost the next moment. The huge fist hit Su Tong's head without even getting close. The terrifying air pressure alone made people feel suffocated. Facing Huo Ying's heavy punch, Su Tong's expression changed. This was the first time he felt the horror of this humanoid monster head-on. But looking at the crystal box that was so close, he did not choose to dodge, but raised his arms brazenly. He held a silver foil paper knife reinforced by spirit in his hand, and at the same time activated the title of Retributor. Suddenly, an indescribable huge force came towards him. The paper blade he was holding exploded into countless fragments with a harsh explosion, and blood flowed from the tiger's mouth on his right hand. Not only that, Huo Ying's punch continued to hit his face with an indescribable heavy and fierce wind. Faced with such an inhuman force, he could only shrink his arms and fold his elbows in front of him, forming a perfect protective posture. But it was useless, not at all useful. Huo Ying's power, which was many times greater than that of a normal person, hit him hard. To him, it was as irresistible as fate. So what if you adopt a defensive posture? The added force on his fist knocked him 4 to 5 meters away. Even under the reduction of Retributor, his body drew a straight line in mid-air and hit the wall hard. Puff. My throat felt sweet, and blood couldn't stop spitting out of my mouth. Just when Su Tong was knocked away, 2 flying blades pierced directly into Huo Ying's back, one after the other. How could Yang Zixuan miss the opportunity that he had given his life for? When he succeeded in the sneak attack, he suddenly saw a long knife in his hand. The blade was like ice, and when he swung it, it made a scream like a ghost crying or a wolf howling. Looking for death, Huo Ying felt the pain and suddenly turned around. You all want to die. While he was talking, he saw densely packed bloodthirsty bees spit out from his mouth, making a deafening buzzing sound, and rushed straight towards Su Tong. Seeing the bloodthirsty bees rushing towards him, a cold look flashed across Su Tong's eyes. There was no fear or surprise, as if he had been waiting for the arrival of these damn bugs from the beginning. The moment these bloodthirsty bees swooped up, blue flames suddenly burst out on him. Demon had arrived. Consume 40% of your own script points. After activation, physical strength and speed will be increased unprecedentedly. The degree of improvement is related to your own strength and the number of script points consumed. And obtain the effect of the Demon King's armor, and the level of the Demon Flame is temporarily increased by 2 levels. This was already the second time he had activated the Demon King's advent. When he noticed the script points that had been instantly scratched out of the prop book, he ignored the physical pain and waved his palms with all his strength, sweeping the demonic flames from his body towards the bloodthirsty bees in front of him. Tap tap tap. Immediately, dark blue fire exploded in the air, and these bloodthirsty bees exploded in the magic flame in an instant, like fireworks being lit. Huo Ying never expected that Su Tong actually had such a trump card. Caught off guard, he suffered a big loss and lost contact with the bloodthirsty bees. His whole body suddenly trembled. Yang Zixuan seized the opportunity and slashed his chest with a knife. He staggered back 5 or 6 steps. Only then did he stand firm. When he looked back at the burnt insect corpses on the ground, his eyes suddenly turned red. He was not born as a girl, so he naturally had no goose seeds, so he had no choice but to become a meow witch. In order to refine the bloodthirsty bee, he didn't know how much effort and time he put into it. Now Su Tong had burned them all, and he wanted to rush up and twist this guy's head off immediately. But how could Yang Zixuan give him such a chance? In just a short moment, the 4 flying blades had turned into 6. Coupled with the long blade glowing with blue light in his hand, Huo Ying was actually suppressed to a disadvantage. However, pretending to be cool is fun for a while, but you have to pay the price afterwards, which is not enough for a young lady in a nightclub to spend money. The duration of the devil's arrival is too short, 30 seconds is not enough time to even take a breath. The time came in the blink of an eye, and without that strong support, he fell to the ground, his face like gold paper. In addition, the maintenance time of Retributor also began to fade, and the powerful curse effect came again. This time the pain was like a tide, and he made a gurgling sound in his throat. His hands were tightly clenched into fists. For a moment, from beginning to end, there was no place that was not painful, even his 2 big waists. It hurt so much that it made him want to die. Oops, it was put on the shelves in a hurry, and I didn't have any preparation. Forget it, let's look forward, and I'll add a post on the release later. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 59. Xiao Chen. Team Wang outside the door helped Xiong Tao and rushed in. When he saw Su Tong lying on the ground and Huo Ying fighting with Yang Zixuan, Team Wang threw Xiong Tao to the ground. "Old guy, let's fight with you," he yelled and rushed towards the two of them. With the addition of Team Wang, Huo Ying, who was already in a headwind, suddenly became more passive. He was too careless. He didn't expect Su Tong to suddenly do something like this. The bloodthirsty queen was destroyed, and his mental state began to fall into a trance. In the blink of an eye, he resisted several punches from Captain Wang, causing Huo Ying to let out a low sound of pain. "Go to hell." Yang Zixuan's eyes were as blazing as fire. Without the bloodthirsty bees, no one could save Huo Ying today. The long blade in his hand suddenly shone with a bright light, and Yang Zixuan himself was blurred. Stinging wind. Huo Ying, who pushed back the king's team with a punch, felt a cold wind blowing on his face, and an unprecedented sense of crisis suddenly surged into his heart, but he couldn't avoid it and could only watch the blue light in front of him piercing his chest. Lower abdomen. "Old guy, you haven't always been strong." New and old grudges, Yang Zixuan roared ferociously, pushing the long blade in his hand into Huo Ying's abdomen. However, as he pushed and pushed, he suddenly realized that something was wrong. The knife in his hand felt like it was piercing into cotton. It was weak and not like it was piercing into a person's body. When he thought of this, his heart suddenly thumped, and he decisively wanted to draw the knife and retreat, but a hand had already grabbed his wrist first. He suddenly looked up and saw a wild laugh on Huo Ying's ugly face. "Caught you." Yang Zixuan's heart sank, and he looked at Huo Ying's lower abdomen with his peripheral vision. When he saw that his lower abdomen was covered with a layer of misty stuff, he suddenly remembered that Su Tong had mentioned it in the forest farm before, and Huo Ying seemed to be immune. The ability to physically attack. At that time, Su Tong was gossiping and no one took it seriously. But what he didn't know was that the news itself was also discovered when Sangu and Huo Ying met for the first time. Unfortunately, when I think about it now, it's too late. I saw him leaning forward fiercely, raising his leg and kneeling Yang Zixuan into the air. He closed his fists and punched him in the chest like a swinging meteor hammer. Suddenly blood spattered, Yang Zixuan's body was like a meteor, and then Su Tong hit the wall hard. People could even hear the sound of broken bones. After getting rid of Yang Zixuan, the Wang team immediately had no cover. He was good in strength, but he was too far behind Huo Ying. He didn't even make a move before he was hit by Huo Ying and hit the ground with a hand knife. Humph. Rubbish. Wiping away the blood from the corner of his mouth, Huo Ying raised his head, jumped up, and grabbed the crystal box from the hand of the witch statue. Ha 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 ha. Looking at the crystal box he got, Huo Ying's palms couldn't help but tremble. This was a legendary treasure, a treasure left by the ancestors of the Miao people. It is said that the source of the Miao's witchcraft is here. Thinking of this, he tremblingly opened the box and saw a light yellow pill lying quietly inside. Seeing this pill, Huo Ying was stunned for a moment. The strange fragrance emanating from the elixir became more and more intense, and even taking a whiff made him feel numb all over and indescribably comfortable. It seems that the root of everything lies in this pill. Thinking of this, he glanced sideways at the faces of Su Tong and Yang Zixuan, and when he saw their desperate expressions, an indescribable pleasure surged into his heart. It seems that nothing in this world is more heart-wrenching than grudges and grudges. Witness the birth of the gods. With a cruel smile, he stretched out his index finger and thumb to pick up the pill, opened his mouth, and threw it into his mouth. Immediately after entering the Dan Wan's mouth, a rich fragrance still echoes between the lips and teeth, making people have endless aftertaste. You have received a temporary invitation from Team J to join the team. Do you want to join? At this time, Su Tong heard the sound of space prompts in his ears. It's over, hurry up and join the team, I'll take you away with me. Yang Zixuan's face was horribly pale. It was obvious that his vitality had been severely damaged this time. He was cursing in his heart why the mission wasn't over yet. Was there anything they had neglected? But now he has no time to think about why he has reached this point, and there is no reminder for the main mission. Because Huoying in front of him had obviously begun to undergo new changes. His strong muscles gradually began to shrink, and his original figure of nearly 2 meters began to shorten at a speed visible to the naked eye. But Huoying felt that his condition at the moment was unprecedentedly good. Not only did the wounds on his body heal quickly at a speed visible to the naked eye, but his originally pale and bluish skin was now as white, moist, and delicate as a normal person. He could even see the skin. Lower blood vessels. Taking a deep breath, his thick black hair reached his waist in the blink of an eye. He opened his mouth and spit out 2 bad teeth. The originally loose teeth now actually grew new ones. Seeing that Huoying was not only reborn, but also rejuvenated, Yang Zixuan felt completely desperate. This time, his grandma's family was at a loss. There is only one way he can think of now: run. Activate the props immediately and leave the world of this script. Even if the consequences are a vicious cycle, saving your life is the most important thing. But at this time, he still did not forget to take Su Tong away with him. Accept it quickly. Don't hesitate anymore. There are still opportunities. Only when you are alive can you have hope. Seeing that Su Tong had not confirmed joining the team, Yang Zixuan couldn't help but become anxious. However, as soon as he finished speaking, he immediately received the news that Su Tong refused to join the team. You're crazy. Seeing Su Tong's refusal to join the team, Yang Zixuan couldn't help but widen his eyes. He didn't know why this guy was crazy. At this time, does he still want to stay and wait for death? Seeing the puzzled look on Yang Zixuan's face, Su Tong climbed up while holding onto the wall, dusted himself off, rearranged his clothes, and walked up to Huoying. You haven't won yet. I haven't lost yet. He. Huoying was so angry that he laughed. At this time, he had rejuvenated, and his body was like the peak of his youth. The powerful power made him feel that he was a god at this moment. Squeezing the person in front of him to death was as simple as squeezing to death an ant. What's ridiculous is that this ant actually dared to talk nonsense in front of him. Huoying asked angrily, ha ha ha, I've seen crazy people, but I've never seen such crazy people as you. Okay, tell me about it, how did you win? Facing the ridicule, Su Tong just took a deep breath and calmed his hands as much as possible. His thin face no longer had the usual bohemian look in his eyes, and the smile on Huoying's face gradually subsided. Have you ever heard of the magic gun? Seeing him put his hands in his arms calmly, as if he was groping for something, the smile on Huoying's face began to shrink unconsciously. Magic gun. Yang Zixuan was startled at first, and his mind kept flashing whether there was such a thing among the prop cards he had heard about. But after thinking for a while, he had never heard of this thing. But when he saw Su Tong's confident eyes, he began to become nervous. He couldn't help but hold his breath and swallowed hard. Does he have any other trump cards? Under the shocked and cautious eyes of the two people, they saw his hand carefully taking it out from his arms. However, when the two people opened their eyes and saw clearly what was in his hand, time seemed to freeze for a moment. Hiss. Madman. Yang Zixuan rolled his eyes and buried his head under his elbows speechlessly, feeling too embarrassed to look any further. Huoying was stunned for 2 seconds. At this time, he could no longer control the muscles on his face. He didn't know whether he was laughing or angry. Looking at the serious face in front of him, even his voice changed. Do you think you are pretending to be crazy? Can you let me spare you? It turned out that there was nothing in Su Tong's hand. The empty palm, with the index finger and thumb spread out, turned out to be pistol. Faced with Huoying's ridicule and Yang Zixuan's speechless expression, Su Tong's black and white eyes flashed with a spark of light, his whitened lips opened slightly, and his teeth touched lightly, bang. The moment he finished speaking, the smile on Huo Ying's face froze, his pupils shrank suddenly, and soon the world in front of him began to blur. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 60. Yang Zixuan, who has been involved in crime since he was in school, has seen too many tragedies of all kinds. Liver cancer and stomach cancer are not uncommon. There are so many young ladies in his clubs who sell their bodies for money. If you ask, there are either old people or sick people at home, old people above or young people below, or there is a scumbag among them. He had seen so many of these people, and he never believed that there would be any miracles in this world. If there is, it only exists in movies. For people in reality, miracles are just a placebo to keep them alive. But at this moment, Yang Zixuan looked at Huo Ying, who looked like a god 1 second ago, and fell straight to the ground the next second. Yang Zixuan's trembling lips opened his mouth wide, and there were only 2 words in his mind: miracle. A miracle? Of course not. Su Tong looked at Huo Ying, who was lying on the ground, silently put his index finger to his lips, and blew a gentle breath. He tilted his head and looked at the dumbfounded Yang Zixuan. The marksmanship is accurate. Yang Zixuan. For you. Seeing Su Tong's expression that he might belch at any moment, Yang Zixuan endured his heartache and threw a bottle of purified water to him. Although he doesn't know what happened, Yang Zixuan has to say that this time it was really a fluke. He made one mistake after another, and finally reached this step in a daze. The loss was as big as his grandma's house, and he didn't know how many pigs he had to raise. To make up for it, they had signed a contract and were not worried that Su Tong would do anything to them. At the moment, he is more worried about the missing dog, who has never been seen. He doesn't know what happened to this guy and why he hasn't seen anyone yet. In fact, what he didn't know was that the mourning dog was waiting below at this moment, but he was unlucky. After the golden door opened, the golden ladder to the palace was cut off. After drinking a bottle of purified water, the negative effects on his body immediately subsided. Although they did not disappear completely, his complexion immediately improved a lot, and the negative effects were weakened by at least 80%. Smash it with your mouth, don't tell me, this tastes much better than the yellow scarf water that Manga gave him before. Sure enough, the stuff from the big dog owner is better, he thought secretly in his heart. Without the negative effects, I felt a lot more relaxed. I walked to Captain Wang, lifted him up from the ground and leaned against the wall. As for Xiang Tao, this guy's face turned into a big ripe eggplant in a short time, and the purple color almost turned black. Yang Zixuan even gave him purified water to drink, but it didn't work. Seeing this, Yang Zixuan couldn't help but frowned, looked back at Huo Ying's body, stepped forward and turned the body over, wanting to see if there was any antidote on Huo Ying's body. However, just when his hand was placed on Huo Ying's chest and he was groping for a while, suddenly I heard someone ask in my ear, "What are you touching?" "The antidote," Yang Zixuan said without raising his head, but after he finished speaking, his hand suddenly froze in front of his chest, and he raised his head blankly, only to see Huo Ying staring at him with narrowed eyes. Ah! Seeing the resurrected Huo Ying, the hairs on his body stood up. He didn't dare to move his body. He tiptoed a little and threw himself to the ground regardless of whether he was in embarrassment or not. He rolled a few times and then screamed, "You are still alive." With that said, he applied to Su Tong to join the team again. "Hurry up, if you don't leave, I will really leave this time." Careless, careless. Seeing Huo Ying come back from the dead, Yang Zixuan's heart was racing. He knew that Su Tong was unreliable. If he had known better, he should have gone up and cut off Huo Ying's head first. "What are you afraid of? She won't eat you." Seeing Yang Zixuan's fussing look, Su Tong walked up to Huo Ying and actually put his arm on Huo Ying's shoulders in front of Yang Zixuan. What's even weirder is that although Huo Ying rolled his eyes at him, he didn't resist. This, what exactly is? It was messed up, it was messed up, it was all messed up. Yang Zixuan's eyes widened, and he suddenly felt that his head was not big enough. Fortunately, at this time, Huo Ying, oh no. Strictly speaking, it was Yang Guanjin who explained, "It's me, Yang Guanjin." Yang Guanjin. Yang Zixuan's mind was numb, but looking at Su Tong's stern expression and Huo Ying's serious eyes, he felt that as long as he didn't take action, even if he said he was old Bart, he wouldn't go. Suspect. Actually, she only said 3 words to me before opening the door. Seeing that he still didn't understand, Su Tong could only explain it himself. It turned out that when Yang Guanjin stepped forward and told him the order of opening the door, he only said 3 sentences in total. The first sentence is the order of opening the door, but it is not 12 squares, but 11 squares. The second sentence is to help her delay as much time as possible. The third sentence is the sentence "I will not harm you." After saying 3 sentences, Yang Guanjin stuffed a small meat insect into his hand. He knew that the little flesh bug was the body of the reincarnation goo. So when she opened the door, she quietly handed out a piece of paper and helped her unpack the contents of the box. "You were obviously afraid of swallowing the contents of the box, so you used the paper man to help me." On the side, Yang Guanjin unceremoniously exposed Su Tong's white lies. So, what Huo Ying ate was reincarnation goo. At this time, Yang Zixuan suddenly became enlightened, slapped his forehead and thought, "Damn it, I'm so deceived by lard, how can I believe in any miracle?" After saying that, he looked at Su Tong curiously, "What exactly is in the box?" The treasure that Huo Ying desperately wanted to get, he knew with his toes, must be an earth-shattering treasure. Even if he couldn't get it, he still wanted to witness it. However, to Yang Zixuan's longing eyes, Su Tong only replied with 2 words, "Secret." Grass. Yang Zixuan cursed and had a resentful look on his face, like a resentful woman who had been abandoned after a night. "This is a deal between us, and you can't look at the things involved," Yang Guanjin explained to Yang Zixuan. However, he pointed to the inconspicuous little side door on the left side of the palace. "After you go out from here, you will see a very strange laurel tree. There is something buried under the laurel tree, which is considered as compensation for you." Hearing this, Yang Zixuan's face suddenly looked much better. Yang Guanjin threw him a medicine bottle, which was the antidote to the poison Xiong Tao had suffered. The moment he got the antidote, Yang Zixuan finally heard the reminder he had been thinking about. Main Mission 2, Exploring the Ascension Bureau is completed. You can choose to return to reality at any time, or you can stay in this space for 46 hours. After receiving the prompt, Yang Zixuan finally breathed a long sigh of relief, took out a business card and handed it to Su Tong. "If you ever need help one day, this phone is always open for you." Su Tong picked it up and raised his eyebrows. "Pink Beauty. Sorry, I got the wrong one." Yang Zixuan blushed and hurriedly gave him another business card. After giving Xiong Tao the antidote, he hurriedly left with Xiong Tao. "Aren't you leaving?" Yang Guanjin looked at Su Tong. In fact, when Huo Ying ate the reincarnation goo, he had already received a reminder that the task was completed. If he wanted to leave, he could leave at any time. He didn't leave just because the matter wasn't over yet. "Someone has to collect the body for you." Yang Guanjin was stunned for a moment, then laughed, "So you understand. I have to say that Huo Ying looks much better now than before. At least the way she smiles now is quite handsome." "Sure enough, he is ugly and has no friends," he muttered in his heart. "I don't understand everything, at least I don't understand some parts," he said straightforwardly. Yang Guanjin walked to the door, pulled out the golden dagger from the keyhole, put it in his hand and looked at it carefully. Actually, Shengxian Bureau has never meant a place. You can understand the word bureau as a trap or a method. So, if reincarnation Gu wants to complete the last step, it needs to fulfill the host's wish, right? Su Tong took out the little book and waved it in front of Yang Guanjin. Is this what it means to live toward death? Yang Guanjin nodded, yes, reincarnation Gu is just a process. In the last step, the host's resentment is needed to guide the way. Whether it succeeds or not depends entirely on chance. So, Su Tong carefully examined Yang Guanjin's body in front of him. Are there really gods? This question actually made Yang Guanjin think about it for a while before he smiled bitterly and said, if you believe it, there will be it. If you don't believe it, there will be nothing. This is a road of no return. People who have walked through it will naturally not be able to come back and tell you the answer. So there are many people who want to take this road, but no one knows whether it is really successful or not. Then I've finished my questions. In fact, he was just curious about these questions, and he had no interest in the so-called gods. This world had just begun for him, and there were too many new things waiting for him. Things like becoming a god and cultivating an immortal. He might as well go to hell. You need to introduce the wrong person. I'm a professional. Hearing Su Tong's words, Yang Guanjin rolled his eyes. Who are you looking down on? With that said, she picked up the dagger and walked out of the hall. Remember to plant some flowers on my grave when you bury me. Su Tong didn't speak, and looked at the little book in his hand silently. Ding dong. With the sound of metal falling, Su Tong's fingers shook slightly, and he continued to flip through the little book in his hand. It was not until he finished reading the book again that he stood up and walked outside the hall, only to see a pool of blood. Yang Guanjin lay quietly on the ground, blood spilled on the ground. I don't know if it was a coincidence, but the blood actually dyed a pair of butterfly wings around her. Looking at the hole on her neck, Su Tong curled his lips and said, it's better for me to come. After saying that, he threw her body, as well as the bodies of Yang Guanjin, Old Bart, and Zhou Huaz hung into the prop book, walked back to the main hall, lifted the unconscious Captain Wang on his shoulders, and walked along the side of the main hall. That path goes out.